Hey guys, welcome back to the channel.
Welcome back.
We got Jordan Peterson, most savage comebacks.
A little excited for this one.
Yes, first time Jordan Peterson is going to be on our channel.
Yes.
We've heard a lot about him. We're both got some Canadian roots, so we have heard about him from the Canadian side of things, but he's obviously blown up on social media in general.
Oh, yeah.
Just from his talking points on how he views some of the things like gender, men in particular. He seems like a very large, strong intellect.
Yes.
In terms of somebody that approaches these subjects, not afraid to talk about them, and approach them in ways that I think are needed in society, because in order for us to move forward, as we've always done throughout history, we need to have these conversations,
For
right?
sure. Yeah.
And smart people should be having them, and he's a smart guy, right? So he's got a background in psychology. He's a former professor, but he's really broken out of just that and into speaking and going on and talking about these tougher subjects. But I think he does
that are popular, talking points in today's society of the way that society is changing.
Yeah, because they're important subjects, right? So I commend him for stepping up to the plate and talking about these things, and even if you don't agree with some of the things that he says, he's allowing you to think about them, which is the most important part.
Stemming the conversation, right?
Yeah.
You're entitled to your opinion, but you have to have a conversation to have an opinion.
Yeah, you're never going to get ahead. Whatever your issue is, it doesn't matter. You're never going to resolve it and get ahead if you don't have a conversation about how you can get there, right?
That's true.
Anyways, let's see what Jordan Peterson is going to say in his highlights and compilation of his most savage comebacks.
Savage comeback.
Let's see how savage Jordan Peterson is.
You have particular guys, the alt-right, who, as you say, some of them have enjoyed your work and say,
No,
I'm not one of you guys. I'm not with you guys.
They haven't enjoyed my work.
I've definitely read bits on the internet.
Read more.
Do you think a trans woman is a real woman?
I don't really like the way those questions are formulated. I don't know what that means. What do you mean, a real woman?
Well, I'm asking you, in your mind, it depends what you think a real woman is, but do you think a trans woman is a woman?
No.
Why not?
Because I think that women are capable, generally speaking, of having babies, and they have female genitalia, and they have an XX chromosome, and I think the biological markers are relevant.
I'm interested in people being able to have different choices and having equality of outcome.
Aha, well, so the overwhelming proportion of people who are in prisons are male. Now, do you want to equalize that, just out of curiosity? What about bricklayers? They're 99% male, and we've got about 3/4 of the population now in universities in the humanities and social sciences are female.
Yeah.
Are we going to equalize that? And men work longer hours. They work more dangerous jobs. They're more likely to move. They're more likely to work outside. They're more likely to participate in jobs in the STEM fields that are scalable. They make more money for those reasons. And that's all hidden under the idea that the reason that men and women make different amounts of money is because of their gender. It's a very simplistic analysis.
Why are you against the use of alternate pronouns?
I'm against the use of legislation to determine what words that myself and other people are required to utter.
But would you use alternate pronouns if a student asked you to?
I think I've made my position on that clear already.
Well, perhaps not to our audience at home who are just being introduced to this. Would you use alternate pronouns? And why not?
Because I don't believe that other people have the right to determine what language I use, especially when it's backed by punitive legislation. And when the words that are being required are the constructions, they're artificial constructions of people I regard as radical ideologues whose viewpoint I do not share.
Until women got full legal rights, they could own property for themselves, they could work. Essentially, they were owned. They were first owned by their fathers and then by their husbands.
Status to the domination by men.
Yeah.
You already said that you thought that what emancipated women primarily in the 20th century was technological revolution.
No, not primarily, but that's one of two. I think that's two things.
Not primarily, eh?
No,
you don't think the pill was a primary force in the emancipation of women?
I think
or the invention of tampons, let's say, or the provision of proper sanitary facilities, toilets, and that sort of thing. You're thinking instead it was the action of courageous feminists in the 1920s that produced a social revolution that overthrew the patriarchy. That's your theory.
Yeah, I think
that's a foolish theory.
Damn.
The thing I really like about when he has these conversations, everything he says he backs by facts.
Yeah.
You know, I think like he doesn't get emotionally charged in a lot of these things. His arguments are substantive in that, you know, he says like, these are the reasons why I believe these things.
Yeah.
Right? You can disagree with that, but at least have a reason why you believe these things and have it, you know, backed by factual information that you've come to the table with.
Yeah, I just found it interesting that you say that, because oftentimes the people that he's talking to on the other side, their opinion is charged by emotion.
Exactly.
So it's just like the, you know, complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
That's pure narcissism at work, by the way. You know, to hijack an event like this that other people put time and effort into, and to use their civility of the crowd and the civility of the organizers as an excuse to blatantly yell out your ill-informed opinions is no way to conduct a civil dialogue. It's absolutely appalling. The people who do that should be embarrassed.
My idea of the patriarchy is a system of male dominance of society.
Yeah, but that's not my sense of the patriarchy.
So what's yours?
Well, in what sense is our society male-dominated?
The fact that the vast majority of wealth is owned by men, the vast majority of capital is owned by men. Women do more unpaid labor.
A very tiny proportion of men, and a huge proportion of people who are seriously disaffected are men. Most people in prison are men. Most people who are on the street are men. Most victims of violent crime are men. Most people who commit suicide are men. Most people who die in wars are men. People who do worse in school are men. It's like, where's the dominance here precisely? What you're doing is you're taking a tiny substrata of hyper-successful men and using that to represent the entire structure of Western society. There's nothing about that that's vaguely appropriate.
But I could say equally well that most rape victims are women. You know, terrible things happen to people of both sexes.
And you could say that with perfect utility, but that doesn't provide any evidence for the existence of a male-dominated patriarchy.
I would say that anybody with more than a cursory knowledge.
See, again, that's what I really resonate with when he said that. He made all these points, you know, alluding to how she was saying that, you know, it's a male-dominated society, and then she tried to come with a rebuttal that said, yeah, but this happens to women, and he agreed. He's like, yes, he's saying, like, that's why you can't say it's one or the other, right? Because I just gave you examples, and then you proved my point by giving me another example to say that things, you can't just say it's one way, right?
Yeah, for sure.
20th century history who dares to claim simultaneously that they have compassion for the downtrodden and that they're Marxists are revealing either an ignorance of history that's so astounding that it's actually a form of miracle, or a kind of malevolence that's so reprehensible that it's almost unspeakable. Because we already ran the equity experiment over the course of the 20th century, and we already know what the Marxist doctrines have done for oppressed people all around the world, and the answer to that mostly was imprison them, enslave them, work them to death, or execute them. And as far as I can tell, that's not precisely commensurate with any message of compassion. Sorry, tried that, didn't work. We got 100 million corpses to prove it, and that's plenty for me. And if it's not enough for you, well then you should do some serious thinking, either about your historical knowledge or about your moral character.
Question for Professor Peterson. Why do you feel that someone's personal gender identity and pronouns infringes your free speech? Can one not also argue, based on your interpretation, that professors can use racial slurs in their classroom and that the inability to do so would violate their freedom of speech?
There's a difference between saying that there's something you can't say and saying that there are things that you have to say. And I regard these made-up pronouns, all of them, as the neologisms of radical PC authoritarians.
Do you understand that? And I'm not a fan of that sort of person. And the reason I'm not a fan of that sort of person is because I've done my homework. I've read everything I can get my hands on in the development of authoritarian political systems, and I know the literature inside out and backwards. And I am not going to be a mouthpiece for language that I detest. And that's that. This whole patriarchy thing, I think you have no idea how pernicious and dangerous it is.
Well, no, I don't. I really don't. Go on.
Throughout history have fundamentally cooperated to push back against the absolute catastrophe of existence. A terrible death rate, the probability of chronic starvation, early death, disease, the difficulty of raising children with all the death that was associated with that. And to look backwards in time and say, well, basically what happened was men took the upper hand and persecuted women in this tyrannical patriarchy. It's absolutely dreadful misreading of history. It's a terrible thing to teach young women, and it's a horrible thing to inflict upon men.
When the Marxists say, well, that wasn't real Marxism, what it really means, and I've thought about this for a long time, it's the most arrogant possible statement anyone could ever make. It means, if I would have been in Stalin's position, I would have ushered in the damn utopia instead of the genocidal massacres, because I understand the doctrine of Marxism and everything about me is good. It's like, well, think again, sunshine. You don't understand it. You don't understand it. And you're not that good. And if the power was in your hands, assuming you had the competence, which you don't, you wouldn't have done any better. And even if you had, there would have been someone else waiting right behind you to shoot you the first time you actually tried to do anything good. And that's what happened to all the old guard who ran the damn revolution. Stalin rounded them all up and shot them, along with their families and millions of other people. So even if you do happen to be that avatar of moral purity that you claim implicitly, the probability that you'd get to act out your goodness in relationship to those possessed by your ideology is zero.
That was some fire.
Savagery.
Yeah, that was definitely on the savagery level. I just love his use of linguistics, language, the way he's able to communicate so effectively and get his point across so well.
Yeah.
I find it very, very refreshing. But I also like how astute he is with history. How much he really, you can see how much he studied history and how he uses that in some of his arguments, because we tend to, as human beings, just look and perceive things the way they are today and right now. And if things were this way, they would be so much better. But he's looking at it like, no, we've tried a lot of these things
and it's failed
in different ways, and it's caused a lot of issues. So you thinking, like you said there, that it's going to be different this time because you're so special, that's human nature, right? We always think to ourselves, it's going to be different for me.
Yeah,
right?
and I think also too, right, like you had touched on before with the way he approaches things versus other people, and I think that could also be said for that, what you just said, and the idea that he approaches it as looking at history from a logical perspective to ration out like what's realistic, versus people are looking at it like, instead of looking at the history, they look to the future and are hopeful for what they think is possible, but aren't looking at the past of like what's realistic.
Yeah, and like you said, you hit on that, right? You can have hope. That's great. Having hope is fantastic, but it has to be weighed on the other side. It has to have some realism, right? So.
Yeah.
Sensitive to offence, such a problem.
Is zero.
Is being sensitive to offence such a problem though? Like, we would have previously called that manners.
It's a terrible problem. So imagine you, okay, so the rule is you can't offend anyone, all right? Let's say you're speaking to one person, I can't offend you. All right, fair enough. What if I'm speaking to 10 people? Do I get to offend 1 in 10? How about 1 in 100? How about 1 in 1,000? You're going to come out on stage and you're going to say something important about something vital, and you're not going to offend 1 person in 1,000? Well, you can't say anything about anything important ever without offending probably the person you're talking to. Important speech about important issues, especially contentious issues, is instantly offensive.
T-shirts.
Lots of them. If you want any t-shirts, guys, click that link. The link is below in our video, so you can click that. So what are your thoughts generally about your first introduction, I guess, to Jordan Peterson thus far?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know too much about him aside from just like, little snippets here and there. And I actually, ironically have his book sitting in my bedroom that I have not started yet. But I think that, you kind of hit the nail on the head there with just saying how the way he presents himself is just so intelligent, and he does his research. He makes sure that he's educated on what he's not talking about. He's not just spewing out emotional BS, right, based off of like how he feels or what he's seen on social media or what everybody else is saying. Which I think is important, right? Because like you said, you have to have those people in the world that are going to be there to do that, or there's never going to be any balance, right?
Yeah, I think also like this is one clip or one highlights of 10 minutes of him. He has tons and tons and tons of lectures. What I think that we didn't get to see in this compilation was that he's really evolved some of his views as time has passed as well, right? Like,
so he's changed his mind on certain things.
Yeah, like he was like, I don't know everything in depth, and I want to open up. Maybe we'll see, how you guys react and what you guys think about Jordan Peterson, but whether we'll do this on the channel. But one of the things I have kind of a brief understanding of is that he was an atheist, and then he now believes in God.
Okay.
So for somebody to be
complete 180 there.
Yeah, to be such an intellectual from his standpoint, a lot of the time you don't see that occur, right? People think like, I know everything there is to
so
know.
they keep their mind so closed.
Yeah, and so they come to one conclusion and they don't change that. So I think for him, that's one of the things that I really do respect and enjoy, is that I feel like he's not approaching it from an egotistical standpoint of just wanting to act like he knows everything. He generally has a desire and a thirst for knowledge.
And the general progression of humanity and society,
exactly,
like, for the best interest.
Exactly. So that's why I think he's open to the criticisms that he receives and will reflect and kind of move from there. So we don't know what his views on some of this stuff might be in 5 years, which is why I appreciate what he talks about more, because I'm like, okay, like you're gonna approach this probably with an open mind of the best way to resolve it. And from an intellectual standpoint, he could be wrong. Right? You don't have to agree with what he's saying, but if you have him come to the table with his idea and somebody else come to the table with their ideas, and they're great ideas as well that disagree, if you arrive somewhere in the middle, you're probably going to reach the best of both worlds, and that's how, like we said in the beginning, you're going to move forward with humanity. So
I think it's also it kind of is a tribute to him and his openness to have these discussions, is that he's putting for a lot of these interviewers or these people he was talking to, he goes in knowing they have a different opinion, right? So it's like he's the one putting himself in the hot seat to be questioned or pushed on some of these things, and putting himself in a position to be criticized and have negative pushback from that, right? So obviously, like he carries himself very professionally, and is in a way where he can not get emotional or like defensive about those things in a way that's like he's not like going over the top with it, right? He's just sitting his opinion, and he's there to have the conversation.
Well, again, it comes back to what we said before. He's bringing facts to the table and responding that way. Like you said, most people, when they get criticized, they're going to take the defensive side of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Put their walls up, or start making. He
had a few savage comments in there, but it wasn't like he was like closing the door. He was just like
but it was, like I said, it was based around logic, right? It wasn't like me saying, Sam, I don't like you because whatever, right? And you respond with, well, you're just an ass, right? It's like
for sure.
An actual core argument that you're making for a reason, but some of these people will come to the table and just try to discredit him, that he's, a right-wing nutcase or something like that, right? And, there's no weight in that argument. It's just,
even that one lady who was like essentially saying like to not offend anyone is like manners. Like that's not manners. Manners is just being respectful in general. You don't have to agree with people and never say anything and stifle your own opinions because it offends somebody else.
Exactly. You're going to have to offend somebody. Like if I tell you, Sam, I don't think your weightlifting form is the greatest, right? You should be doing this, this, and this, right? You can take that as a couple of ways. You can take it as being, I didn't have any manners and I, said that to you. That's so terrible.
Yeah, like that's something completely different than saying, wow, your hair is really ugly.
What I was going to say was I'm still critiquing you.
Yeah.
Right? I'm offering you criticism on your squat form or whatever, right? So you can take that as, why are you even saying anything? Just shut up. Don't say anything. Don't try to make an improvement in me at all. Yeah. Right? Or you can take that as, oh, like that sucks. I wish you hadn't have said that about my squat form. Or you can even say that sucks. I want to improve, right? Knowing that, like, there's going to be that period of time where somebody says something to you, usually, where you're like, well, that sucks hearing it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that it's not going to lead to improvements down the road.
No, for
right?
sure.
And so that's what I think the key cog in that argument is like, you shouldn't offend anybody. It's like, no, to get things across, like he was saying, that matter, sometimes you're going to have to offend people.
For sure.
Right? Anyways.
Especially in the masses, like he was saying.
Yeah, anyways, we've been rolling for a while here. I hope you guys enjoyed our first introduction to Jordan Peterson. I know we were talking a lot ourselves, but it was because Jordan Peterson got us connected. And, we like to have some of those detailed conversations ourselves. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button for us. If you would like to see more Jordan Peterson or other intellectuals, we'll call them, on the channel, then let us know in those comments. And we've got lots of other stuff on the channel as well. So hopefully you go and check that out. That's it from us today, guys. We'll be back soon.
Thanks for watching.